We are absolutely 100% live, coming at you here on Podbean. We're coming at you over there on LinkedIn. We're also on YouTube. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope you're well. I hope your week is going well. My week has been an interesting one so far. I've been up to a fair bit, and there's a bit to come, actually. Tomorrow is a nice, calm day. Tranquilo is what we say here in Spain. I have a day with nothing on my calendar, which is going to give me plenty of time to finish writing the activity book that I'm working on at the moment, which is all good fun. But yeah, I've got a nice relaxed day. But then Friday, everything goes a bit mad again. I'm speaking in Kuwait for the first time ever, and I've got a climate change debate class in Italy, and I've also got an interview with a sustainable businessman. His name's Maxim, and he works for Strudels. And yeah, so I'm talking to him. So it's all very, very exciting. What's coming up, and what's going down as well. What has happened since last week? Oof, lots of writing, actually. I've done lots of writing and a fair few classes as well. You know, being a teacher, that happens. So yeah, as I mentioned, I've been working on this activity book and preparing some training sessions as well. The new training course is coming up very shortly. And of course, listening to the wonderful Teachers Talk radio shows. I don't know if anybody tuned in earlier today to Jane Ritter's show with Peter Fulliger. It was brilliant. Yeah, I was on the edge of my seat. I was. What do you say if you're listening intently on something? I wasn't on the edge of my seat because I wasn't like, oh no, what's going to happen? It wasn't one of those crazy cliffhanger moments, but it was just a really, really top level show. I really enjoyed it. What else has happened since last week? Well, I've binge watched the entire second series of Bridgerton because, why not? I absolutely love the soundtrack. I love what they do with the music in that show. It's absolutely fantastic. The way they play modern songs with old style music. I really enjoy listening to the. Yeah, it's just different. I sit there and I kind of try and guess which types of songs they're going to play and what's coming up. And that's a good question. What is coming up? Today is it's an episode I've been very excited about for quite a while. Now, I'm sure most of you know I am interested, nay, obsessed in the climate crisis in education. So when a great friend and colleague of mine, Nita, said she'd be willing to come on and talk to me today, I absolutely jumped at the chance because Nita is, well, she's brilliant and you'll meet her soon. But she's the Chief Content Officer for Subject to Climate. Now, she's going to tell you more about Subject to Climate, of course, but they are a non-profit that I hugely admire these guys. They're absolutely wonderful. They provide free materials for all subjects, all levels, from K through to 12, I believe is how they say it in the States. But obviously, it can all be used in the UK. It can be used in international schools as well. And it is absolutely fantastic. It's all teacher checked. It's checked by scientists. And best of all, it looks really good too. That's obviously not best of all, but it does look absolutely fantastic. So I'm lucky enough that Nita's agreed to come in and talk to us, and we can talk about that, but also the role of education and what the role it has with the climate crisis. Now, I was recently giving a talk, and somebody said to me, the SDGs are absolutely vital in education. I stopped, and now don't get me wrong, I think the SDGs are a wonderful tool for education. I think they're brilliant. And in fact, I use them in Renewable English. Every other week we have a different SDG. But I said, I don't think the SDGs are key to education. What I think is education is the key to the SDGs. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Obviously, not just the Sustainable Development Goals, but the climate crisis, education, and how the two are important to each other and the difference we can make. So we're going to shoot off now for the news and a particularly good 2-minute tech review. We'll be back very shortly. Stick around, and we'll see you very soon. Welcome back, everybody. So I am going to welcome into the studio Nita Singh. She's going to join us here. Nita works for Subject to Climate. She's the chief learning designer. I got her title wrong earlier, which was terrible of me. So my apologies for that, Nita. I double checked and I was like, what am I doing? I just mentioned Dan by mistake. That was bad. So thank you so much for joining us. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Harry. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear as a
Perfect.
bell, wonderfully. And thank you for getting up nice and early as well. I know it's not the same. It's the drive home for us here over in Europe, but I imagine for you it would be the drive to work. Where are you exactly?
I'm in my room. I work from home, so no driving for me.
That's good. I mean, saving on the commute. My drive to work, well, I commute to work by walking my daughter to school and then walking home again.
Oh,
That's my
that's lovely.
that's my drive, I guess. So thank you again for joining us. Before we continue and get into the nitty-gritty of the climate crisis in education, I would like to know a little bit about you. I
Mhm.
know a tiny bit about you, but our listeners and our viewers, obviously, they don't. So, could you tell us a little bit about you and a bit about your story in education?
Okay. I w- I would like to start really, really early on, even before I became a teacher,
Hmm.
and to get into why I became a teacher in the first place. So I came to the U.S. I'm living in Southern California right now. I came to the U.S. as a little girl from Cambodia, and growing up, my parents always had us working a lot. We sell donuts and fried chicken, so I was always working every day. And up until high school, I was working, at a tea house and at an electronics store. And when it was my senior year and I was, supposed to go to college, I really questioned the value of education because I had worked so hard and I saw my managers, they were doing really well with life, and why not become a manager of this electronics store? And so I ended up getting a full ride to college, and that's what like really pushed me to move towards education. um, and we had grown up really poor, so when I got to college I was shocked by how wealthy higher education is. And there were two experiences in college that really pushed me into the direction that I'm in now. And the first one was this opportunity I had to go to Russia. I signed up for this course called Soul of Siberia. And so
Hmm.
we got to and we got to really study Lake Baikal. And Harry, I don't know if you know a lot about Lake Baikal, but it's the oldest, largest, deepest lake in the world. And back when I was studying it in like 2008, 2009, it was providing 1/5 of our fresh water.
Oh wow!
And so, what is wild to me is that I got to study it on campus, and then I got to actually go to Lake Baikal, and it was majestic. It touched me in a way that I couldn't really just study. I had you had to be there, and I remember seeing that there was this factory, and I don't remember if it was tire or paper, um, but it was tragic, and for the American listeners out there, it's as if like someone built a smokestack factory on the Grand Canyon. It was really impactful for me.
Hmm.
um, and and I think in that moment when I saw that, and in my experiences at Lake Baikal, I started to question, like, w- what's the limit? What's the limit that we have in our interactions with the environment? Like, where do we draw a line?
Yeah.
Um, and that was really my first experience. And then the following summer, I went to Cambodia for the first time. And I think growing up in the US, but then seeing how climate and climate changes impacted my home country really was powerful for me, because it was just so much more, like, it was so vivid when I visited how dependent like life is on the environment, where like my life in the US, it just seemed so distant.
Yeah.
And so those two experiences really pushed me to become a teacher, and use education as a leverage for social change.
And for me, like, our position as teachers, it is one of, it's one of the best places to help with social change. We are amplifiers. Our message goes out to who knows how many students in a lifetime. I know when I was teaching in China, I had 60 students in a class, and I was teaching 15, 20 classes. So
Wow.
yeah,
That's crazy.
it's absolutely insane. So in a week, I would see 600, 800 different students. And you think about that, if you only impact on 10% of those people, that's 80 people you've had an impact on. And if those people then go home and speak to their parents, and it doesn't have to start with huge things and these ideas, but these are people, that was 12 years ago now. So these are people who are now, they're in their mid-20s. So if I had some kind of impact on them, maybe that's had an impact later on in society. That idea that we amplify this message to them, and it's it makes such a huge difference. I had a very similar moment to you, the one you had at Lake Baikal, when I went to a place called Black Sands Bay in China, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. I went to a luxury spa. It's when my parents had come over to visit, and we went on this wonderful trip to Black Sands Bay, and we went down to the beach. And next to the beach was an enormous like power station.
Mhm.
It's just like,
Yeah.
and it was one of those moments where you kind of look across like, how can you do that? Like,
Mhm.
and obviously, power stations are things we need. We need power. Okay, we don't necessarily need fossil fuel power, but in those moments, that we do need power. But it's like, why put it where it's going directly out into the ocean from that? And like, but the fact that it's at a beauty spot really brings it to your attention, doesn't it? And you can see the damage it can cause immediately, but it makes you think about all of the other power stations there are out there, and all the other damage that is happening. And it's almost like those big things are the things we need to change. So the way to change them, in my opinion, the best way to start is through education.
Yeah, Harry, and while you were talking, I was really thinking about just how there are so many climate problems, and then there's so many climate solutions, right? And
Hmm.
individually, we can't embody every single one of them, and we can't focus on every single one of them. But your idea of how, as educators, we can amplify it to reach out to as many students as we can, so that they tackle some aspect of it, and really not encouraging those like siloed applications, but like collaboratively working together. And I think that's why climate change education is so intimidating, because it's just so complex, and so overwhelming. And then you think about the emotions involved, right? So like,
Yeah.
even when I was retelling that story to you about seeing that, like, my heart was like, oh man, like, it brought up emotions for me. And so one thing that we try to do as we design lesson plans as subject to climate, we think really critically about how to process and manage and model those emotions, that anxiety, because some of the topics that we teach about, that we design about, is just, it's just terrifying. Like I like I really have to sometimes stop and breathe, even though I know I'm just writing a lesson. I'm safe in my room writing a lesson. I the emotions can be so overwhelming. And so one thing that I really have our content creators do is, I challenge them, like, how do we write lessons so that students feel empowered and not overpowered, and like, and really that has to do with climate action, right?
Absolutely.
And that's been our focus with these lesson plans.
That's it's something that I've seen a lot of, with particularly with youth activists. I work a lot with youth activists, obviously, and there are quite a few that just massively impress me. You see 16, 17, 18-year-olds, making these huge changes, but it is usually they find, I don't want to say a niche, because it's not a niche, but it is that one part of climate action, because you can't tackle everything. It's too overpowering to say, I'm going to fix everything, going to go vegan, I'm going to stop using plastic, I'm not going to ever use energy that isn't renewable. It's too much. So you can look at Kids Against Plastic and Amy and Ella Meek. Obviously they focus on plastic, and they focus on empowering young people like my daughter, to learn about making that change, and you look at Clover Hogan, who is absolutely incredible, part of Force of Nature, and her idea is that changing eco-anxiety into agency, because I think too often we get afraid of eco-anxiety. It's a real thing, but I think not with young kids, but I think when it comes to like older teens, for example, it's not a terrible thing to have a bit of eco-anxiety, because it kind of, it raises that awareness. But rather than, turning it into fear, it is that changing it into action. So there's those two paths. You can have your eco-anxiety and you can run home and you can cry into your vegetable soup that everything's terrible. Or you can get out there and you can make vegetable soup for other people and say, look, it's just as good as meat soup. So, why not try and make a change?
Yeah. And I really love that you brought up youth leadership, because sometimes we think that we're educating students for like the future, the next generation, but really youth leaders are leading now. They are taking climate action now, and like the examples that you presented, they're sometimes better than us at managing emotions and taking actions. And what I really appreciate is their fresh eye perspectives on things. And I was recently in an event where this youth leader from Ecuador, she was speaking about the climate smart mining, and the new mineral demand. And the question that she asked, and the idea that she was presenting was like, does the environment, does nature have rights, right? And so when I look at infographics by these international organizations, the question is, how do we meet the demand of this of climate smart mining? Like, how do we mine sustainably? And what this youth highlighted for me was, this might not be the only question to ask. Not like, how do we sustainably mine, but it's like, let's backtrack a little and think about all the other questions, like, what evidence shows we need this much mineral, and like, are there limits to our demands from the environment? Are there limits to our demands from nature? And so a lot to learn from the youth.
that is the thing as well, because a lot of where the youth activists are coming from and the ideas that they're coming, the angles they're coming from, it is in the interest of the future of for them and for other people. It's not with this interest of they want a better Earth, they want a better planet. It's not like a lot of where the way we see things now with, do people want a better Earth and a better planet, or are they just using it as an angle?
Mhm.
Whereas when you see these youth activists that they're coming up, they've started when they're 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. Their ideals, they're pure ideals. What they
Mhm.
want is for a better planet, and I'm constantly blown away when I go to these meetings on Saturday and I see these 10, 15 kids aged 3 to 14 talking about what they're doing. They're giving talks at their schools. They're going out and they're doing litter picks and they're doing all these different things, and it just blows my mind to see how aware these young kids are, and what they get from their these youth activists, these people who are 17, 18, and they're helping them. They really get a lot of kind of respect from that, and it isn't just okay, the teacher is the one who has the knowledge.
Mhm.
Now teachers can look to their students and say, well, actually, hang on, you have that knowledge. You're empowered. You know about this. You come to my class and you talk about it. It doesn't have to be
Mhm.
me. It doesn't have to always be teacher led. It can be student led. And I guess my main question out of all the questions ever. Now, I often get people asking me, what has the environment got to do with English teaching? Now, I'm not going to bore you with my answer to that. But it seems like a silly question, but I'm going to ask it because I know listeners will be thinking it. Why is it important to teach about the climate emergency?
Yes, this is a great question because I think it's not why is it important that we teach it, but that it's important that our students learn it, right? It's it's that they deserve to know what what we've been doing to this earth, and how we're tackling the issue, right? And to
Or not
really
tackling the
or
issue?
not tackling, yeah, or not tackling the issue. And so they deserve, no matter what discipline, no matter what grade they're in, to understand what's been done, and also to understand like which lessons to take, from what has been happening to
Hmm.
our earth and to our environment. Um and as we've said, they can learn about the climate science. They can take all this climate knowledge, and what like we would really love to push here as Subject to Climate is to see our students not only have this basic understanding of climate science and knowledge, but to really inspire them to take that action, to take climate action. And I think they're better than anyone to tell us how they can close that gap between knowledge and action.
I absolutely love that. And the next time somebody asks me, I'm going to say, it's not about us teaching it; it's about they deserve to learn it. I
Oh,
love
Harry,
that.
for some
I love
reason, I
it.
can't hear you right now.
I'm using that. I'm taking that on. Can you still hear me there, Nita? It looks like you're.
Oh, there we
There
go.
you go.
You're
You can
back.
still hear.
Yeah.
There we go. I
Great.
disappeared for a moment. I apologize. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. The students deserve to learn it. It's not, about us teaching it. It's about them learning it. It's such a great point. Now, we've mentioned very briefly Subject to Climate a few times. It's something I often talk about whenever I'm giving talks, or people always say, oh, I'm not an expert, so how can I teach this, that, or the other? And oh, I don't have time to make my lessons because I have to do all the research, and I have to do this and I have to do that. And I have a few answers for that. One of them obviously is go to Renewable English, because there are all things there. um, um, uh, Another one is, you don't have to be an expert to teach it, because I know as an English teacher, I was not an expert in grammar and I was teaching it. and another one is there are plenty of materials out there that have been made and checked by experts. At which point I always guide teachers, be it English teachers, be it science teachers, geography teachers. I always guide them to subject to climate. Now, can you tell us who are subject to climate, not what is, because it's a who. It's definitely it's a family, I guess. It's a wonderful group of people. Who are subject to climate, and what are the core values?
Yeah, thank you for that, Harry. And really, who are subject to climate? We're really just a group of teachers, a group of educators who saw the problems that you just mentioned. Like, I don't have time. Climate change is not what I'm supposed to be teaching. I'm supposed to be teaching math or history. Um, I don't have time to create these resources. I don't know if these resources are credible, that science looks real, but is it real? So we're just teachers who had this exact same conversation, had this exact same problem, and we decided that there's a great need for a online connector resource database where teachers can go find comfort, find trust that our materials are credible, unbiased, engaging, and free. Above all else, we really care that teachers, they spend so much. I've been a teacher for 11 years. I taught middle school math for a long time, and always I was asked to do so much and spend so much of my own resources to teach. And so that was a big aspect for us, to make sure that teachers could access everything for absolutely free. And that's essentially what we are. We really believe that no matter what subject you're teaching, no matter what grade level you're in, like, you should have the resources that you need to implement climate change in your classroom. And that's essentially our who. And then to your what. So if you go on to our website, you'll see that there are a few core values that come through. One is that we love teachers. We love teachers, and all of our resources are for teachers by teachers. They've been vetted through a group of scientists, and then vetted through a group of educators. So, when I would look at the resources before, I would see that a lot of them looked scientifically great. But as an educator, I was like, I wouldn't use this though. So from like a scientist perspective, some resources might be great, but from an educator perspective, it's different. And so we have these two layers where both scientists and educators look at the resources.
It can just be like with some of them, it can just end up as just numbers, can't it? You just have a list of facts basically. And as a teacher, I don't want just a list of facts. That's not going to engage my students. They're just going to be like, well, today I learned a whole list of facts. Great. That's not engaging.
Yeah, exactly. So we have those two levels, and then you'll see clearly how much we love teachers on our platform. And then the other thing is how much we integrate justice in our resources. And we're very aware of the inequities related to climate change and the environment. And so we try to provide as many diverse perspectives and voices so that we're aware of these inequities, and we can do something moving forward. So you'll see that teachers, justice, very, very big core values. And then, above all, the science has to be on point.
Absolutely. Now, I obviously I follow Subject to Climate on everything. On LinkedIn, TikTok, Twitter, Insta, Facebook, everything. And I really, whenever there's a new lesson come out, I love to go in there and have a look, because there's such a wonderful like array of things that are coming up and things that are being released, and with stuff about green spaces or air quality, and there are different things that come out all the time. So like we mentioned before, the the subject of climate change and the environment is such a broad one. It's it's something that you can you can find almost anything and turn it into a lesson. That's what I did with the first season of Renewable English. Was I just went through a textbook and picked out every single unit and was like, I'm going to relate that to the environment. I'm going to relate that to the environment. And I just love how many different things there are in there, and like the different ideas, with discussion, with media literacy. It's got literally everything you could want, and it's all, as you say, it's all very attractive. And you didn't say that, I said that it's very attractive.
I agree with you though.
But yeah, it's all been checked, it's all that the science is there. And I think that's just it's really important to add that there isn't any fake news in there. It's not just hype, because I can get carried away with the hype when I see somebody post something on Instagram, and it might even just be a quote or a meme, and I'm like, that's outrageous, and it fits my ideals, so I'm going to agree with it. And I know that's not the right way to go, and I know what I need to do is stop and look at it. But that's the way the world is now. It's micro learning, and everything in an instant. We've got it there. We see a meme, we think that is terrible. The world is awful, and we don't stop to check the science. Now, what I love about Subject to Climate is it's been checked. The science is checked. It's been done there, and it's all credible, absolutely credible.
And Harry, I just want to point out two other features on our platform that might be a little bit new to you and maybe the listeners. We partnered with The Juice, right? And what they do is they provide student-friendly news articles, right? And if you access the Juice articles from our platform, you'll see that we've put together climate-related news articles completely free. And then you can adjust the reading level. So all the way from 5th grade to 12th grade. And when you adjust those reading levels, you'll see that the vocabulary changes. And then at the end of that news article, there's a question that's aligned to the Common Core English standards here in the US. And the students can click on an answer choice and see if they're correct or not. And it really develops important skills in English, in language, and differentiates between different reading levels. So that's one feature that I definitely recommend teachers check out. And the other, when you were talking about lesson plans, so we have a resource database, and we've partnered with amazing content providers like Renewable English, and we have over 1,000 resources. And I really want to emphasize that we're adding so many resources all the time. So if you go onto our platform and don't find what you're looking for, first of all, tell us. There's a feedback button, but also check back in a week or two. It might be there, because we're working hard here, and we're trying to get as much quality resources out there as we can. And so, when we talk about climate in all subjects and grade levels, this is not something that people really accept, right? Or really think is possible. And so with our content creators, we write original lesson plans that are meant to take a standard that you would normally be required to teach in American schools, like say fractions, or converting fractions to percentages, something like that. We take something that you must teach, is required, and then we contextualize it into a climate change topic. So we put it into, let's say, food justice. And so now we're like sneaking in, we're sneaking in climate change topics everywhere, because in most states it's not yet a requirement to teach it. Um, though last June, New Jersey, it's a state in the U.S., northeast state, became the first state to require comprehensive climate education, in all grades and all subjects. And um, we're partnering with New Jersey to create exemplar lesson plans so that we can support teachers in transitioning, and meeting this mandate requirement.
That's brilliant news. I mean, it's great news, and it's also, sad news that it takes so long for it to be like for it to happen. It's amazing that it's happening, but and I look at here in Spain as well. It was only this year that it went into the law that after, so only in primary school, but they had to have a level of eco literacy, and that only came in September this year, so. And I'm not sure how quickly schools are adapting to it, or if schools are simply, putting up a poster of the Sustainable Development Goals, and they're like, there you go, that's that box ticked, as that one done. So it's good to see that New Jersey have actually gone and they've sought professionals to help them with that transition, because as I say here, it's a bit of a struggle, and I know that teachers are overwhelmed. So, as soon as, and especially since the pandemic, and they're just more and more piled on top, now there's cost of living, and some teachers can't even afford on their teacher's wage, to make ends meet, and they're having to take other jobs. So even this idea of saying, I think you should be teaching climate change, finding a way of getting it into your classes, that suddenly it's just like, it's too much for me. That's why having these lessons that are there that are about what they're teaching, you need to, teachers have syllabi that they have to get through, they have curriculums that they have to get to the end of, because there are exams that must be done, and it's just a great way of changing things up. I had a word with my daughter's, I've had a few words with my daughter's teacher. The teaching here is very, very traditional. And so whenever we go to the school allotment, I do English lessons with them at the school allotment, and we have a lot of fun there. But I look at her maths homework, and my daughter's 8, and she's doing long division and like long multiplication. Yesterday she was like, "Oh, hey, Daddy, do you know what 4,427 times 48 is?" And I was like, "No, I don't know that, and I don't need to know that. And you certainly don't, because you're 8." So I had a word with the teacher with that, and I was like, can you not present it in a way that isn't just numbers on a page? Because that's useless. I mean, it would be great if he could teach it in a climate change aspect, but I was also like, mate, that everybody in the class loves Pokemon. Why don't you try and change it with Pokemon? It's like, how could I do that? It's like, come on, like, teachers are so overwhelmed that it's like their creative juices have just like stopped.
Yes, and I have to say that teachers get blamed for so much. And whenever there's a problem, we're also told to be the solutions to so much. And it's very tricky, because when I was working as a math teacher in Los Angeles last year during the pandemic, I constantly felt like I was failing. I was failing as a math teacher. They just, I was working so hard, but I felt like I was just constantly failing. And when I started contextualizing my math into climate change topics, I made it so much more relevant to the students. And through the pandemic, they saw, a reason to learn it, because it was an interesting teaching year, because even though I've taught for, a decade, it was my first time teaching completely remote. So I'd never met any of my students. And as you know, I really believe that teaching is like 99.9% relationship building. And so how do I build a relationship to humans I had never even met? And so climate change topics is some, you know, brought an interconnectedness to all of us through the remote space, through, you know, the gaps in math knowledge, and really made lessons come alive, I think, for me and for them.
Yeah, I think that the challenge of remote teaching was one that, you know, we all experienced. For me, it was a light bulb moment for me, like just seeing how amazing and adaptable teachers really are. You
Mm,
know, they are always expected to do this and make a change here and do that there, and you know, there's always that kind of expectation on teachers, and seeing how it went from, you know, it face to face to online like overnight, you know,
yeah.
and it's not
Yeah.
even remotely the same. Like, you know, it's so different.
Hmm.
And then from that, it went to kind of hybrid teaching, and you know, schools and academies and have kind of expected teachers like, oh well, you know how to teach in a class, and you also know how to teach online now, so you must be good at hybrid teaching. You know, it's a bit like, you know, well, you know how to swim and you can catch a ball, so you must be really good at water polo. Like, come on, guys. You know, so much expectation is placed on the teacher, which is why, you know, they need support
Hmm.
for everything. You know, they need support with um, you, absolutely wherever they can get it from. You know, be it for climate change, be it for, you know, switching to remote teaching. You know, wherever they can get support, be it for, you know, SEN, be it, you know, for social justice issues, whatever it's for, teachers need that support.
Mm,
It needs to be there, and far too often it doesn't come from within the school, you know, and that's not. I'm not pointing fingers at schools and, you know, admin in schools. I'm more pointing fingers at governments. Let's be honest, for not providing the proper support. But that's exactly where, you know, subject to climate can really make a difference to these teachers, because you mentioned earlier how much money we spend as teachers, just, you know, on supplies for the classroom and this and that, and
yeah.
you know, maybe you get a subscription to a website where you can get lesson plans, and you know, it's those tiny subscriptions that really add up over time. You know, I'm an idiot. You know, my Netflix subscription comes out at a different time that my Photoshop subscription comes out at. You know, so every now and again, you know, I'll have 12 euros here and, you know, 13 euros there, and it doesn't seem like a lot, but when you actually look at it, it's loads. You know, if you add on to that stuff for your work, like, come on, it's just crazy. So this idea that it's completely free is something that it fills my heart with joy, to be honest.
Yeah. And you know, I just want to say that here, you know, at Subject to Climate, we understand that we're playing an important role in getting climate change education more accessible to teachers and students. But we're very much aware that there are other aspects of teaching, of learning, of the education system that that needs change. And so we really want to provide what we can to teachers, right? And we acknowledge that, you know, they've been tasked with so much for everything, really, and then, you know, really underappreciated and underpaid. So even if you're not a teacher spending all of your money on your students, which I think most teachers do, you're also just like not being paid enough from the start, you know. Um, and and that's really a, a tough like contradiction, as you see, like at, you know, in Subject to Climate, when we were developing, we had to rely on teachers, right? But teachers were already overburdened. So even in the creation of Subject to Climate, we witness this tension of
Hmm.
teachers being overburdened and you know, wanting to give. The crazy thing about teachers, and maybe because I just love teachers so much, but like despite being underpaid and underappreciated, they just give and give and give. And even the teachers that I meet that were, overburdened, the New Jersey teachers that I'm working with right now creating exemplar lessons, they have so much, and yet they're willing to, take on another fellowship to create more lesson plans so that other teachers can feel supported. And so I think I just want to, send a big appreciation and gratitude for all the teachers out there, because like through my work with teachers, I just know like we expect so much and we don't appreciate them enough, and they're just still willing to give.
Yeah, exactly. I want to ask you something now. I mentioned before that the thing about why should we have the climate crisis in education. Now, how would you approach somebody who came to you with a very kind of, now, I'm not going to say a climate denier necessarily, because I think it's difficult. I can't speak to people who actually deny climate change. I just can't. But if somebody like did come to you and said, "Hey, Nita, there's just no place for climate change in education. It's a political matter. We shouldn't be teaching it." How would you deal with that?
Yeah, I think I would just go directly to their everyday life, and I wouldn't respond with any answers or opinions or any beliefs. I would just start questioning them about what they do every day, like how they get up, how they get to work, what they eat, and like have a conversation with them about their everyday life, because this is not distant, like the climate crisis is not some like distant issue. It's very much at the cornerstone of how we breathe, the water that we drink, everything about our existence and about our living is climate, right? And so we don't have to say, you know, okay, if the person says the climate change doesn't exist, all of that, okay, let's just forget that word for a moment, right? And then I would just talk to them about the environment that's around them. Like, what do you think about the air that we're breathing? For example, in California, like last year, our entire state, all the national parks, for the first time ever in history, shut down because of wildfires. Like, let's talk about this, right? And really get into what is happening in their daily lives. And I think that's the best way to approach people who say that climate change should not be taught in education, because education, the purpose of it, I think some people, I don't know who, but some people still think that it's about preparing students for, these standardized tests, but the majority of us think that it's about preparing students to interact productively
Mhm.
with our environment, with our lives. And so when you see climate change as a way to like live harmoniously, live better, to continue to live, then I think it makes it more challenging to say you shouldn't teach climate change.
Well, exactly. I mean, there was a study done very recently, and 80% of blood samples were found with microplastics in them. Now, that's something to me that I find like very scary. I can
Hmm.
understand that there are going to be, microplastics in water. I get that. I can
Hmm.
see how that happens. And, okay,
Hmm.
I'm not okay with it. I'm absolutely not okay with it, obviously.
Yeah.
But how does it get into your blood? Like, how is it that entrenched in society that is literally running through our veins? And in 2014, there was a new species was discovered in the Mariana Trench. A new species of, like, it was like a prawn basically,
Hmm.
um, and it had microplastics in it. It's like we didn't even know it existed, but it had microplastics in it. And it's like, these are the things that, okay, maybe you don't want to teach about climate change, but there are things that you can teach about that aren't
Hmm.
necessarily, you know, the planet is heating up,
Hmm.
the ice caps are melting. These aren't, they're not things that we need to focus on, but these small things, these micro things, we could say,
Yeah,
I think they're
and
absolutely vital.
yeah, Harry, when you were speaking, I was thinking about some lesson plans that are coming out on subject to climate, and um, the the conversation has been: is this climate change enough? Like, are these lesson plans climate change enough? And so we have a Spanish, a foreign language lesson on how to live in a community, like what is a community versus a group. And so we have those lesson plans that seem like they're not related to climate change, but they very much are,
Hmm.
right? So, like, living in a community, the meaning of responsibility, right? These are all values that are at the crux of the climate crisis. And so you'll see that our lesson plans like go beyond just like the science of it all, and whether you believe the science or not, or whatever your beliefs are, I'm sure like there's something that you agree on, and maybe that is other values like living in a community and living responsibly.
Now, the next thing, something I think is becoming, well, it's a bit, it's scarier and scarier. But do you think it's time that we maybe stop talking so much about climate change mitigation and start talking more about climate change adaptation? Because it's very obvious we're not going to get anywhere near 1.5 degrees. That's like,
uh,
that is a, you know, even the most optimistic of people, um, even the most optimistic of people won't, will admit that that's not the case. But yeah, should we be teaching that? Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you a moment to think about that. I'm not
mhm.
going to throw you on the spot like that. We're going to shoot off for some adverts very briefly. So we'll be back in about 2 minutes. So please do stick on that one, and we'll be back very, very shortly. We are back, and just before we shut off there, I asked quite a difficult question that I hadn't actually prepared Nita for there, so I thought I'd give her a second to gather her thoughts. It's something that's just occurred to me, like in recent days, actually. Yeah, should we be teaching climate change adaptation or mitigation, or both? Let's not go extreme on this.
Yeah. And I think the overwhelming, response here would be that we need both climate adaptation and mitigation. What I would challenge, though, in our thinking here about, whether we should focus on climate adaptation or climate mitigation, is to really think through the questions that we are asking, because these questions will determine our behavior and our response to it. And let me give you an example of a lesson plan that we were working on. And it had to do with lithium mining in Chile.
Mm-hmm.
And the question that we first started off with was, how do we electrify vehicles more sustainably? Because it's obviously hurting some communities. And that wasn't the right question, right? That was not the right question. It's not about electrifying vehicles more sustainably, but it's about how do we improve public transportation so that more people can get from point A to point B comfortably, conveniently, and affordably. And so instead of thinking about, climate adaptation, climate mitigation, yes, we have to do both at this point. But let's really revisit the questions that we are asking and what we are willing to accept as assumptions, as biases, and really re-question everything from the beginning and really select carefully the lessons that we're learning right now. Like there are a lot of lessons we can learn from our fossil fuel period, and now we're going into this mineral period. And
Mm-hmm.
and my concern is that our thinking, is still the same. It's a very similar mindset of like, how do we take from the earth and live how we want to live, right?
Yeah.
And I worry that we're not learning the right lesson here.
Yeah, it is far too often that how do we do this sustainably? It's like, well, not doing
Exactly.
it is the most sustainable
Yeah.
way. How do we mine lithium sustainably? Here's a clue: not mining it in the first place. They're those kind of ideas, and it's one of those big things that I know a lot of people do. And when you're taking your first steps to becoming more sustainable, you have all these grand ideals. And I know that some people have been like, right, well, I'm not going to use plastic anymore. I'm going to try and cut down on my plastic. So what they do is they go into their drawer where they've got all their plastic sandwich bags. They take them out and they throw them in the recycling, and they go and buy loads of beeswax bags. And it's like, well, it's a nice beeswax bags. Great. They are less than plastic, but what you've just done is waste all of that plastic. Fair enough. As things run out, maybe replace them with this, that, or the other. With now I've got a bamboo toothbrush. Now, I'm not showing off here or anything. But honestly, it's almost these small acts are almost gimmicks, as it were, for somebody to go out there and go, right, I'm not going to use my old plastic toothbrush, but what I am going to do is I'm going to use a bamboo toothbrush, saving the planet, and it's that kind of, it's a bit like with recycling as well. What do you do to help the planet? Well, I recycle. But, they've got their halo above their head in that moment. And I'm not saying recycling is a bad thing. I think everybody should recycle, and it's a great place to kind of start with your raising awareness within yourself. But there are many more things that we need to do. Like, instead of recycling, don't buy the plastic in the first place. Leave that oil where it is and don't create it.
Yeah, and I struggle with this too in how we create content, because like I don't want to push this burden of fixing the climate crisis on the individuals, right. And so it's like the companies that are producing this, why is it so hard for me to go to like a store and try to buy a sponge to clean to clean my kitchen, and then like I'm standing in the aisle and I'm stressed because I don't know what I'm supposed to buy. And I don't think that's the right way to think about it. And so I don't want to shift the burden, because I really do think the root is getting at the systemic changes, right, that we need. But I would say that if there is one thing that we can all do, is just in every aspect of our lives, like consume just less,
Yeah.
just consume less, and like
And don't waste.
yeah, and don't waste, and really just like think carefully before you buy, if you really need it or not. And it's not to say like you need to buy the right thing. It's just more like, do you really need to buy it at all? And sometimes that answer is yes, or like it's something that brings you just immense joy, so go for it. But it just really thinking about not the pursuit of comfort and convenience, but really like, is this really happiness for me? Is this really joy and pleasantness for me?
Yeah, I mean, for me, one of the prime examples of that is when it comes to clothes. I
Yeah.
know that a lot of people love clothes, and like I've seen a huge change in my wife. Now, she absolutely adored, fashion and clothes and this, that, and the other, and she would, go shopping and buy things because she liked it. But now, she's taken a big step back, and now she goes, thrifting, or she'll get it from from an app from somebody around the area, so she can go and collect it and stuff like that. So yeah, when it comes to clothes, it's a tough one, because people love fashion. I obviously don't. I'm not one of those people, and I can comfortably live in the clothes I've had for the last 15 years, and just get by. But yeah, that's for me is kind of one of the real starting points. Do I really need it? Is it something I absolutely need? And that can kind of spread out to everything else as well. Now, I do my shopping here in the village. I go to the local greengrocer. I don't know if you call it that in American, where you buy your vegetables.
Yeah,
Probably call it
like a
a
farmer's
vegetable
market.
store.
Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. I don't know. Yeah, so I go there to get my veg, not only because it's grown locally, which is great, but also because they don't put everything in plastic. And the other day I went into the supermarket because I was making a delightful broccoli bake. Love broccoli. And the greengrocer closed, and I got in there, and all of the broccoli was wrapped in plastic.
Yeah.
And I was just there with this like conundrum, because I'd planned to make a broccoli bake. So in my head, I was eating broccoli bake for dinner that night. It was like, all I wanted was broccoli bake. And I was standing there and I could see the broccoli, and I was like, I can see it. And I could easily buy it. And if I don't buy it, well, somebody else will buy it. And if I don't buy it and nobody else buys it, well, it will just go to landfill anyway. So what do I do? In the end, I made a cauliflower bake. It was okay. I pivoted, I took a moment there. So yeah, I think this idea of not over consuming and really thinking about whether we need it is, on an individual level, it is really important, but also as an educator, to take that into the classroom.
Yeah.
At the end of every year, what I do with my students now is I say, what have you got that you can use next year?
Yeah. And teachers are doing a lot to try to bring it into the classroom. I saw a TikTok video yesterday about a teacher who wore the same dress every single day and didn't say anything to her students about it. And then when they finally asked, she said she wanted to show them that they didn't need, they didn't need to shop or spend their money on new outfits all the time, and that it was perfectly okay to wear the same things over and over again. And one thing that I've really picked up is repairing my clothes. So even
Yeah.
if they get torn or ripped, and I even have like some people like stop me on the street. They're like, "Do you know there's like a hole there on your shirt?" I'm like, "I do know, but I can still wear it."
Yeah.
And so I think teachers are doing a lot to try to bring that into the classroom.
I'm really like proud of my daughter with that, because she'll get a rip in her trousers and she's like, we can fix it. So that's cool.
Great.
I'm a huge fan of Ursula de Castro. From she started Fashion Revolution, and she's got a brilliant book, Love's Clothes Last, and that's like what's inspired me. And I've got jeans that I've repaired. I would show you, but I've put a new zip fly on
It's
my
okay,
jeans.
Harry.
I'm not sure it's appropriate.
I believe you.
At this time of day, but I put a new fly on my jeans. I sewed a hat which was broken. These are all skills that we don't really learn them in school anymore. I don't
Not
know
anymore.
I had home economics as a
Me too.
kid,
Yeah.
and I learned some basic sewing, but I'd forgotten most of that by the time my zip broke, or my zipper, as you might call it. So these ideas, and yet it is filtering down to other people. Now we've not got long left. I do want to know. So, subject to climate is pretty new. Let's be honest. Yeah. It's a fresh face on the education scene. A beautiful fresh face, by the way. Subject to climate is wonderful. But where next? What next for subject to climate?
Yes, this is a great question, because we are just getting started. So it's exciting because we're just getting started, and I feel really proud of what we've already accomplished. And so what you'll see as you visit, subject to climate more often, is that we're really working to elevate our inspire section of our lesson plans. So all of our lesson plans follow 3 chunks, 3 steps, and it's inquire, investigate, inspire. And to some extent, we've been struggling with this inspire section to make it more engaging, to make it really more climate action. And the next step that we're working on right now, is to create a group of subject matter experts in the field of climate advocacy, people who are out there taking action right now. And these subject matter experts will serve as consultants to our teachers. So our teachers, our content creators, will have access to people who are taking action, who have direct insight into climate solution, climate problems. And so what you'll see is this elevation in our lesson plans. And the other thing that I'm really excited about, and it's very like, we're just talking about it now, so we're not taking immediate action, but the direction that I would like to go forward is to think about how we can involve students more on our platform. And I went to this discussion with some school leaders, and they were asking, like, is there a student forum where students can connect with each other, like high school students can connect and share what they're doing and their knowledge. And there's really nothing out there that's like, they couldn't come up with anything, and I did some research and I couldn't really come up with anything. So I would really like to turn our attention a little bit more to connecting students as well as connecting teachers.
Because at the moment for students and young people, the way they can connect. It's in a more of a passive way. It's all, you know,
Yeah.
it's seeing what people are doing on Instagram. It's seeing what people are doing on TikTok. You know, they can see these things that people are doing, but you know, can they actually like connect? There are so many steps between a connection. You know, on Instagram, for example, you see a great video of somebody out there doing something, you make a comment on it. That comment might just be completely lost. You know, there's no that comment, it might respond from that comment. It might then go into a DM. You might have a chat. It might grow into something bigger. But the likelihood of that, you know, it's finding a needle in a haystack. You know, it's a 1 in a million chance that will happen. Unless you're out there actively seeking people and, you know, going into them and saying, I want to do this, I want to do this. Having that space, that forum to share ideas, and particularly if, you know, if they've had this lesson, you know, if they've all done this lesson. So let's say somebody in New Jersey's done the lesson, also someone in Wisconsin's done the lesson, but then also you've got somebody in an international school in Spain, someone in the UK, someone in Australia. You'll have all of these different ideas and these different opinions, and the different ways the kind of lesson has developed, and the action that's coming from it, the action that's coming out of it, and the agency that's coming on from it. It's such a wonderful opportunity for them to connect with people across the world and you know, see how it's affecting them. So you mentioned about the fires in California. You know, look at Australia as well. There are these parallels, you know, between California and Australia, that if there was that space for people to connect, it would be incredible.
Yeah, and I think that's a really great point, Harry. Like, I think climate change, really shows us how interconnected we really are, and sometimes we think we're strangers, right? But in so many ways, we are not. And what Subject to Climate hopes to do is to facilitate these crucial small conversations so that we are thinking through and acting through at the speed that we need to, because it is an emergency and it is urgent, and really we need to act now.
It is something that is, a great point that I look at, throughout my life. Like, I'm 38 years old now. Yeah, I know I don't look a day over 37 and a half. It's fine. It's fine. I'm 38 years old now, and I look back at my life through education. When I was, I think about 7, there was a campaign at my school to collect aluminum cans. See what I did? I didn't say aluminium.
Great job.
to collect aluminum cans so they could be recycled. It was like there was a kids TV show called Blue Peter, and that was like a big Blue Peter appeal that we would collect cans. That was when kind of recycling came into my mindset. But I remember back then it was called the greenhouse effect. And then slowly it changed to global warming, which was like, okay, so the Earth's getting hotter. That's still not great. And then it was around the kind of Bush era that it turned to climate change, which is just so much softer. You've got global warming and it's like, oh, that doesn't sound good. Surely we don't want to be getting warmer. Yeah. Warm is bad. Warm melts ice and we need the ice to stay there. But yeah, it changed to climate change, which to me, it doesn't actually sound that awful. For me, climate change, that'd be great. Here it gets to 50 degrees in the summer. I'd love for that climate to change. If it could go down a bit, if it could drop to, the high 30s or 100 degrees Fahrenheit, if I'm going to translate it into imperial. I'd love that, but no, it went from global warming to climate change. And I think only now, in very, very recent history, literally the last year or two, it's become the climate crisis or the climate emergency. And I know it sounds like a very English teacher thing to say, but semantics are so important. Just calling it climate change is something that, it's climate change, climate crisis, climate emergency. These are things that people need to know. It really is an emergency. We really need to be making huge changes to everything right now. And, we're educating our kids and so on and so forth. They're not, when they're decision makers in 15, 20, 30 years, it's too late. these people who are educated, these people who are aware, these people who are empowered, who can go out there, they can change their buying patterns, they can change their investing patterns, but they can't make the big decisions. They can protest, they can, go to the street, they can influence big decisions. So yeah, I think this change, it needs to come within everybody, to be honest.
Yeah, and I really couldn't agree with you more, Harry. And I can't stress enough to my my colleagues and the teachers that I work with and the students, just the balance that we constantly have to play in our minds of just like, oh my goodness, this is an emergency, this is a crisis, we have to act urgently with like, hey, yes we do, but we also have to think carefully as we move urgently, right? And it's a very, very tricky balance.
It really is. You don't want kids, staying awake at night, having nightmares about the climate emergency. Obviously that's, I think there are, I always get the climate into my classes, like without fail. Every single class, there is a mention of the climate crisis. Now, this is, I've got a class of 6-year-olds, I've got teen classes, I've got adult classes as well. No matter what we're doing, no matter what we're studying, it always has, a climate focus on it. Obviously, renewable English, there's always a climate focus on it. That's literally what it is. And yet there are times when, I like to get the class riled. I like to get them angry with things. There are times, there's a time and a place for students to be like, you know what, I am angry about that because that isn't right. But not every class. You don't want your students leaving every class, baying for blood at the oil companies. If they got it, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. But so it is that kind of balance of, you do need the positive in there as well. It can't all just be the negative.
And I find, integrating humor is a really great way to temper the anger, but not invalidate it or not say that it's a negative emotion or anything like that. It's it's taking something that is extremely serious, but also understanding that we can put a little joy and a little humor into our very, very serious work.
Exactly. On that note, I'm going to slowly draw things to a close. I'll let you get to work because your day is just beginning.
Yes, it is.
What a start to the day. Sorry, hold my calls. I'm gonna be talking to Harry for a while. So now you get to jump into your day. Don't worry, I've still got a few things I need to tie off here. So it is approaching 6:30 here in Spain. 5:30 for our listeners in the UK. I'd like to say a huge thank you, Nita, for coming along. It's been lovely to get to know you a little more, to connect with you. In fact, at the moment, you're sitting perfectly. You have an almost saintly glow above your head there. So you've placed yourself perfectly for the morning sun there. Please do have a wonderful day, and do stay in touch. And I urge everybody, I will put the link in the description as well. Go to subjecttoclimate.org. Find them on all of the social medias, every single one, just in case you missed something, and do check them out there. Thank you so much for joining us, Nita. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I really, really enjoyed my time here. And thank you so much to all the teachers and educators and listeners and anyone involved in the climate crisis. Really, so much gratitude and warmth I send to everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So that's all from us today. I will be back next week. And of course, stick around because in not very long, about half an hour, we've got Nathan Ginn who's going to be on, my fellow Wednesday Wombat. He's going to love that I called him that. It's been brilliant having you all here today. Thank you so much, everybody. I'll see you next week. Take it easy. Stay green.